Okay.
Okay, very good afternoon, my dear friends. Welcome to today's session. So today's our eminent resource person, Dr.A.KAVITA Madam Garu, Assistant Professor, Department of Botany, RBVRR Women's College, Autonomous, Hyderabad. Madam is going to explain one of the important area in BRYOPHYTA. So all the participants listen carefully. During the class, if you have any doubts, please you ask our respected resource person, Dr.A.KAVITA Madam Garu. Madam, please start your session and share your screen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chandra, sir. It's me, Kavita, ma'am.
Okay, Chandra sir, hearty welcome. Chandra sir, good afternoon. Chandra,
good afternoon, sir.
Chandra sir, good afternoon. Okay. Maybe
yes,
sorry is not audible. Madam, please you proceed.
Hello?
Yeah.
Chele.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all. This is Kavita, Assistant Professor from Department of Botany, RBVRR Women's College. So today we are going to cover the important points in Polytrichum. Sir, please, there's a disturbance, sir.
Oh, madam, okay. Madam, please proceed.
Yeah, I'm start sharing my screen here. Right. So we are going to cover the most important and the advanced bryophytic member, what we call it as Polytrichum. So the classification, as we call this as the moss plant. So previously we call the other two, that is Markensia and the Anthoceros, as warts. But whereas Polytrichum, it is considered to be as a moss plant, okay, which is an advanced bryophytic member. So when we talk about the classification, it belongs to the class which is called as BRYOPHYTA, order Polytrichales, family Polytrichaceae, and the genus Polytrichum. Now, so when we talk about the occurrence, so as usual, like other members of the bryophytes, even Polytrichum grows in the cool and the shady places, and that too in the temperate and the tropical regions. Now, when we talk about the morphology, that is the general structure of the plant body. So here the adult plant. So plant body often it is referred to as gametophyte because the plant body consists of the reproductive organs, possesses the reproductive organs. So hence we call it as a gametophyte. Now the adult plant comprises of main two parts, which we call it as the rhizome and the upright leafy shoot. So when we look into the structure here, this is the structure of the Polytrichum. So here the basal part which we see here growing horizontally on the surface of the substratum, this part constitutes the rhizome, and the other part where you can see which becomes upright and erect. So this part of the plant body is considered to be as a upright leafy shoot. So generally the plant is comprising, or we can categorize this into two parts. Now when we talk about the rhizome, so this is a horizontal portion of the plant body which is growing underground. That is, it is beneath the soil surface or any other substratum. Now it is going to consist of 2 or 3 rows of small brown or colorless leaves, and it also bears rhizoids at the bottom for fixation and absorption. And the cells of this rhizome, they are rich in oil globules. Now, when you talk about the next category of the plant body, that is the Polytrichum gametophyte. So the upright leafy shoot, we told you that it is an upright. That means the leafy shoots, they become much longer and they become erect and they stand straight on the surface of the substratum. Now, this leafy shoot, it is going to arise from the rhizome, and so this upright leafy shoot going to consist of the central axis, just like the stem of the higher plants, and on either side, on the central axis here, we can see the large leaves which are arranged spirally. So here you can see here. This is the central main axis of the upright leafy shoot, and around the central axis, we can see the development of the leaves, long leaves, which are spirally arranged. So as the plant body here, it appears just like a miniature plant. It is miniature plant. Miniature means very small. When you look into the structure here, whereas the Anthoceros and the Markentia, those were the bryophytes which were just that we call that plant as a thyloid plant body, because it is not differentiated like root, stem and leaves. But whereas in Polytrichum, which is advanced bryophyte, the thyloid plant body is originated, or the thyroid plant body is evolved, or it is emerged into a miniature plant body like structure. Okay, that's why we call it as a central axis. There is no true root here. There is no true stem. That's why we call it as a central axis. There is no true root. That's why we call them as rhizoids. Okay, and on the central axis, we can see certain large leaves which are arranged spirally. Now, how are these leaves here? They have broad base. So they are sessile. They doesn't have any petiole, something like that. So they have a broad base, and the upper portion of that leaf is green in color, and oftenly the brown is brown. So we call it as a dorsiventral. And each leaf, it has a broad, colorless sheath leaf base and a narrow distilled limb. And the midrib of this portion of the leaf, we call it as a midrib. And they possess the upper surface of the leaf, they possess photosynthetic tissue for performing photosynthesis, hence they're known as the lamellae. So that this photosynthetic tissue is in the form of vertical plates. So these plates, we call them as the photosynthetic tissue or the lamellae. Now when we talk about, so here you can see, this is a broad sheath, the leaf base, and this is a long leaf, okay, pointed, and the margins of this leaf is blade. It is showing somewhat the narrow, this is a narrow distilled limb, we call it as, with the sharp edges. It is not an entire margin here. You can see the limb is a sharp edge. Now, when we talk about the internal structure of the leaf, the Polytrichum leaf, it has a complex internal structure. As we told you, the central part of the leaf is a midrib, which is very thick in origin, but the margins are only one cell thick. Now here, when we look into, this is the structure of the leaf, the transverse section of the leaf. So this is a epidermal layer, a single layer of epidermis, and this is upper epidermal layer. And this epidermal layer here is surrounded, it is very much only one cell thick, bounded by the epidermis on the lower surface. And above this epidermis, you can see the presence of sclerenchymatous tissue. This is complete is a sclerenchymatous tissue. And above this sclerenchymatous tissue, you can see here, these are the lamellae. We call them as a photosynthetic lamellae. That is, the cells are vertically arranged, and these cells, they possess chloroplast. Hence, we call them as the lamellae performing the photosynthesis. Next comes to the stem, what we call it as the central main axis. Now, the internal structure of this stem consists of three regions. One is the medulla, cortex, and the epidermal region. And medulla is often differentiated into the two zones, what we call it as central zone and the peripheral zone. And these cortical tissues are thick-walled and basically useful for storing the food material as well as providing the mechanical strength. And the innermost layer of the cortex, it is going to be surrounded by the conducting strands here. You can see here. These are the conducting strands. So the main purpose of it is to conduct the food as well as the water from the surrounding tissue. Hence, we call it as a mantle. And the cells also, as I told you, the cells are also helpful in storing the food material. So hence, they are going to store the starch grains as the food material. This is about the anatomy as well as the external morphology of the plant body. Now, when we go into the reproduction point of view of the polytrichum, so vegetative reproduction, it is generally carried out by protonema and fragmentation. So what is this protonema? Protonema here, it is a filamentous structure which always develops from the spore. Okay, when the spores are liberated, the spores will undergo germination. On germination, these spores are forming a filamentous structure with the rhizoids. So this protonema is considered to be the juvenile stage of the gametophyte. Juvenile stage means the first formed plant of the adult plant body. So the first form, that is spore, will germinate into a new baby plant. So we call it as a juvenile stage. So hence we call it as the protonema. Now on this protonema, sometimes there are several buds are going to be developed, which are considered to be as a vegetative buds. So these buds, these will propagate, and they're helpful in the propagation and produce the new plant body. So that is about the protonema. Now, when we go into the fragmentation, so as we know that fragmentation, that is when the plant, any part of the plant, when it is detached from the plant body, if the plant, the detached part, if it is having the capacity to show the meristematic activity or to develop into or to behave like an independent plant, then we call it as a fragment, or that process is called as fragmentation. Generally, the rhizome, we already discussed this, they give rise to erect leaf shoots at the intervals. So with the death and decay or the breaking of the shoots, or when the erect branches, when they are getting separated or detached from the main plant, if they have the capacity to develop the rhizoids and behave as an independent plant, then the process we call to be as the fragmentation. So this is about the vegetative reproduction. Now when we move on to the sexual reproduction here, so the sexual reproduction is somewhat complicated when compared to the lowermost bryophytic plants, because on the polytrichum, it is a dioecious plant, that is male and the female, they both are different from one another. The male polytrichum plant is different from the female polytrichum. So how we are going to identify the male polytrichum and the female polytrichum? So it is with the help of the heads. At the time of reproduction, the terminal part of the central main axis, where the leaves, the cluster of the leaves which are present at the apical region, they are getting modified or transformed into a rosette-like or flower-like structure. So that we call it as the head region. Just like head inflorescence in the higher angiospermic plants, how we see the presence of the head inflorescence, in the same way here in the bryophytes, the central main axis on both the male as well as the female, the leaves on the apical surface will transform. They will all come close together, and they are going to enclose the respective reproductive parts. Suppose if it is enclosing all the leaves which are there at the tip, if those leaves are enclosing the antheridium, then we call the head as antheridial head. Suppose if they are enclosing the archegonia, the female sexual organ, then we call them as the archegonial head. Okay, so based on that, the male polytrichum plant can be differentiated with the female polytrichum plant at the time of maturity. Now, so when we discuss about the morphology of this antheridial head, so these antheridia, which are the male reproductive parts, they are born in the axillary, that is at the tip region, in the clusters at the tips of the leafy stems. In the clusters, clusters means in a group. Now these antheridia, they are surrounded by a rosette of leaves. So here you can see, these are the antheridia. You can see these are the antheridia. Okay, the long the long elongated structure, this is the antheridia. Now this antheridia here, they are enclosed or surrounded by the cluster of leaves, which are called as perigonial leaves. Okay, so how these leaves are, they are spirally arranged. Okay, around the antheridia, they are spirally arranged and just resembling like a flower. Now, so these antheridia, they are produced in groups, and the antheridial head have different antheridial groups. So just now I told you, these are the antheridial groups, and along with the antheridia, we can see, that is in this antheridial head, we can see the presence of some elongated cell structures, what we call them as paraphyses. So these are the long elongated cells. We call them as the paraphyses. These are the multicellular long filamentous cells. Now, what are these paraphyses? Paraphyses are the cells which are helpful for absorbing the atmospheric humidity or the water vapor, and due to which they will help in the dispersal or the dehiscence of the antheridia for the dispersal of the male gamete, the so-called anthrozoids. So always paraphysis helps in dehiscence of the antheridia or the help in dispersal of the anthrozoids. Now, how is this each antheridia? This antheridia, it is a club shaped. You can see here, this is a long and elongated club shape with a short stalk and also surrounded by a single layer of jacket layer. Now, inside this antheridia, we can see the development of antheridial mother cells. This it is a microspore, or we call it as a mother tissue. So this antheridial mother cells, upon maturity, they will undergo reduction division and results in the formation of the female the male gamete, what we call it as the anthrozoids. Now, what are these anthrozoids? They are motile. We can see two, it is biflagellated. We call them as biflagellated sperms or the anthrozoids. Now, these anthrozoids, they are thrown out of the pore. So, the antheridia at the tip region, it's going to consist of a pore or an opening. Through this opening, the cells which are going to be present inside, all the cells, they will digest and they will form a mucilaginous substance. Through this mucilaginous substance, the anthrozoid, the biflagellated anthrozoids are liberated out of the cell, that is out of the antheridium. Now, when we talk about the archegonial head, this is the female polytrichum plant, the female plant, where even the apical region, that is the tip of the central axis, here also we can see the cluster of leaves. Cluster of leaves means all the leaves at the tip region, they are coming close to each other and surrounding the flask-shaped archegonia. So the leaves which are going to surround this archegonia, we call them as perichetial leaves. Whereas in antheridial head, we call them as perigonial leaves. So this is an important point in the competitive exam. Perichetial leaves. What are these? These are the leaves which are going to surround the archegonia in polytrichum. What are perigonial leaves? These are the leaves which are going to surround the antheridium in the antheridial head. Okay. Now these leaves, what are these perichetial leaves? They are overlapping with one another and forming a closed bud-like structure enclosing around 3 to 6 archegonia. Now, the structure of archegonia, which is well known, consisting of a flask-shaped and a small stalk, which is a multicellular structure, and we're going to see the presence of a long neck. You can see here. This is a globose venter, and this is the multicellular stalk and a long neck. So this is a conspicuous characteristic feature in the polytrichum. Archegonia is consisting of around 6 vertical rows of the neck canal cells or the neck cells. That's why it becomes very long. Now, next on the venter, you can see in the starting, the apices or the venter going to consist of one venter canal cell, and it also in this venter also accommodate the female gamete, the so-called egg cell. And here in the archegonial head, we never come across the presence of paraphysis. Paraphysis are going to be absent in the archegonial head because here there is no need for the dispersal. Okay, there is no need for absorption or for dehiscence of the antheridia, something like that. It's only the venter which consists of the female gamete, and this is the neck, and these are the cover cells through which the antherozoid, the male gametes, when it will reside here, they will drop through the neck and enter into the venter and undergo fertilization. That's it. So hence, the archegonial head does not possess any paraphysis. So here in the examination point of view, the question may be twisted like this. Number of paraphysis in the archegonial head. So in the options, they'll give like 2, 4, 6 and none. So the answer will be none. That means there are no paraphysis in the archegonial head. Whereas in the antheridial head, we can see, depending upon the number of antheridia, the antheridia and the paraphysis, they will be alternating with one another. That is, suppose if there are 4 antheridia, there will be 4 paraphysis, or 6, vice versa, like this. Each antheridia will be alternating with one paraphysis. Now, so this is the development. So development we doesn't require here. Fertilization here. So when the antheridial head and the antheridia, they dehisce, they are going to release the antherozoids, the so-called the male gametes. And these male gametes, the sperms, what we call it as sperms, they are biflagellated. They are going to reach the archegonial head or the female polytrichum plant through the mucilage, which is through the mucilage which is exerted from the neck region. So it is a chemotactic attraction of the antherozoids towards the female plant. So in the neck region, all the neck canal cells, they will disintegrate, and due to the disintegration, a mucilage will form. That mucilage will be oozing out of the archegonia. So through that mucilage, the antherozoids are getting attracted towards the archegonia, and they will reach along with the water from the fertilization. So along with the rainwater, these antherozoids, they will reach towards the archegonia. And one of the antherozoid, it swims down the neck and reaches the venter, and it will fuse with the egg cell which is present in the venter. Happening to the next step, that is in the female plant in the archegonia, the plant will that is the plant will develop the zygote, the zygote which is developed in the archegonia, that zygote will develop into the next phase of the life cycle, which is called as the sporophyte. And in the polytrichum, the sporophyte is the complicated, highly complex structure when compared to Markensia and the Anthoceros. So just a minute, I'm just stop sharing here and share the another one, another PPT here, please. Right.